Commander Sarah Chen gazed at the powdery gray surface beneath her boots and smiled quietly inside her helmet. After 6 months of meticulous planning and 3 days of spaceflight, she now stood on the moon's south pole. Above her, Earth floated. In the vast black sky, like a distant blue marble. Beautiful and unreachable. Control. This is Lunar Base Team 1, she spoke into her comms. We've landed successfully. Beginning initial setup. Copy that, Commander Chen A. Voice replied from Earth. Good luck out there. She turned to observe her team unloading gear from the lander. Dr. James O'Kafer was already organizing his geological instruments, its movements slow and deliberate in the low gravity. Dr. Lisa Vulov was checking over the power systems, essential for their 2-month survival. Engineer Maria Santos had begun assembling the drilling units for the mining rig. It was time to begin. This marked humanity's boldest move into deep space since the Mars colonies. Their mission, to build the moon's first long-term mining station. The lunar surface held valuable metals and rare elements Earth now desperately needed. But more importantly, this would be humanity's first sustained home away from Earth, Sarah. You're going to want to see this, Dr. O'Kafer called. He was crouched beside an unusual rock formation embedded in the regolith. These mineral patterns, something's off. Sarah bounded over, her steps light and slow in the reduced gravity. She followed his finger to the area he was studying. The rock layers were a spectrum of colors, but the arrangement wasn't random like typical geology. They formed precise, geometric structures. That's strange, she said. Any idea what could have done that? No clue, James replied, but I want to scan it. Something about this feels ... wrong. Sarah gave a tight nod. James had been studying extraterrestrial geology for 2 decades. If he sensed something unusual, she trusted him. Maria finished assembling the ground-penetrating radar and aimed. It at the odd formation. Scanner emitted invisible pulses into the crust, then listened for echoes. Within minutes, data began scrolling across the screen. Oh my God, Maria whispered. Sarah leaned in. The screen didn't show the usual empty voids and jagged rock patterns expected from a natural subsurface. Instead, she saw something that made her heart skip a beat. Roughly 50 meters beneath the surface was a perfect geometric structure. It was massive, easily 200 meters long. It was unmistakably artificial. That's not possible, Dr. Vulov said, leaning over Sarah's shoulder. Nothing natural on the moon forms a shape like that. Run the scan again, Sarah ordered. Check for any equipment errors. Maria repeated the scan 3 more times. Each result came back identical. Something enormous and artificial was hidden beneath their feet. Control. This is Lunar Base Team 1, Sarah said, forcing her voice to stay steady. We've encountered some ... unusual readings, requesting permission to investigate. There was a long pause before Control responded, Define unusual, Commander. Sarah glanced at her team. They all understood the weight of this moment. If there was something man-made or alien in the moon that humanity hadn't placed, then they were not alone. We've detected a massive underground structure, she said carefully, geometrically shaped. It appears to be artificial. In origin, another pause. Are you certain this is an equipment error? We've triple-checked Control. Readings are consistent. Commander Chen, you are authorized to investigate. Proceed with caution. Document everything. Excitement. An anxiety twisted in Sarah's gut. Copy that. Control. Beginning excavation. The next 12 hours passed in a blur of labor. Working in shifts, the team used their drilling equipment to bore down toward the anomaly. The moon's weak gravity helped ease the effort, but they were careful, not wanting to harm whatever lay below, as the drill bit deeper. Their instruments began returning increasingly bizarre results. The object seemed to be made of materials that didn't register properly. One scan said it was metallic. Another labeled it crystalline. And some reported both at once. This makes no sense, Dr. Vulov muttered, studying her data screen. The object's reflecting radio waves in ways that violate basic physics. How do you mean? Sarah asked. The reflections aren't logical. Some waves bounce back before even hitting the object, and others return stronger than when we sent them. James looked up from his own work with a furrowed brow. I'm seeing something similar in the mineral samples. From the surrounding soil, the mineral composition keeps changing when I'm not looking directly at it, James muttered. Sarah frowned. That's not possible, I know, James replied. But look. He held up 2 sample containers. I collected these. From the same exact spot, 5 minutes apart. This one's normal lunar rock. This one contains compounds that don't exist on Earth. At 30 meters down, Maria's drill abruptly struck something solid. The bit stopped spinning and let out a piercing, high-pitched whine. That's it, Maria said. We've hit the surface of whatever's down there. Sarah climbed into the excavation trench. Her helmet light swept across a strange surface. It appeared like polished black glass. But as she shifted her head, iridescent colors shimmered across it like oil floating on water. I've got visual on the object, she reported. It's beautiful and completely impossible. She reached out carefully, her gloved fingers brushing against the sleek surface. Instantly, symbols flared to life beneath her touch. They weren't in any language she recognized. The symbols twisted and reformed as she watched alive. Fluid, shifting. Sarah, get out of there. Dr. Vulov's voice came through in alarm. My instruments are going haywire. But Sarah couldn't move. The symbols had accelerated, changing faster now, and somehow, deep in her mind, she felt they were speaking to her. These weren't random glyphs. They had structure, purpose. Commander. James called, voice edged with fear. Sarah blinked. She realized she'd been motionless, staring for minutes. She turned away and climbed quickly out of the trench. What happened down there? Maria asked, concerned. I'm not sure, Sarah replied. But it's not inert. It reacted to me. Dr. Vulov held up her tablet, filled with data streams. Look at this. The second you touched it, all of our systems went into chaos. Time, gravity, fields, everything spiked and dropped erratically for exactly 3 minutes and 17 seconds. And after that, Sarah asked, then most readings returned to baseline, except for this. Lisa pointed to a data column still blinking erratically. Our atomic clock says we lost 17 seconds. But the backup clock says we gained 43. Sarah stared at the anomaly. In 2 decades of missions, she had never seen anything remotely like this. Whatever lay beneath the moon wasn't a ruin. It was something alive or waiting. We need to expose more of it, she said at last. And we need to be very, very careful. As they worked to clear away the remaining debris, Sarah couldn't silence the unease building inside her. The symbols she'd seen kept flashing through her. Mine burned into her memory, and somehow she knew they weren't random. They were meant for her, for all of them. The universe, it seemed, had been waiting for someone to come here. The question was, why? Commander Sarah Chen stared at the pale gray dust beneath her boots and allowed a quiet smile to form inside her helmet. After 6 months of preparation and 3 days of transit, she now stood on the moon's southern pole. Above her, Earth floated like a distant blue gem in a sea of black, beautiful, and remote. Control. This is Lunar Base Team 1, she said into her radio. Landing successful. Beginning setup procedures. Copy that, Commander Chen. Came the reply from Earth. Good luck down there. Sarah turned as her team began unloading equipment from the lander. Dr. James O'Kafer was already unpacking his geological kit, moving with deliberate care in the low gravity. Dr. Lisa Vulov checked over the power cells that would keep them alive. For the next 60 days, Engineer Maria Santis was assembling the drilling rig that would kick off the main operation. This was humanity's boldest expansion since the Mars colonies. Their goal: construct the moon's first permanent mining station. Lunar soil contained rare minerals Earth now urgently needed. But beyond that, this place would mark the first real human foothold off-world, a second home. Sarah, come take a look at this, James called out. He was kneeling beside a peculiar rock formation embedded in the regolith. These mineral lines don't make any sense. Sarah bounced across the uneven terrain and knelt beside him, where he pointed. The Rock revealed colorful layers, but they weren't naturally chaotic. They formed perfect geometric arrangements. "That's strange," she murmured. "What do you think caused it?" "I have no idea," James admitted, "but I want to run a ground scan. This doesn't feel right." Sarah gave a silent nod. James had studied extraterrestrial geology for 2 decades. If he sensed something was off, it probably was. Maria completed setup on the ground-penetrating radar and aimed it at the odd formation. The machine fired invisible signals deep into the lunar crust and waited within minutes. The screen flared to life. "Holy Mother of God," Maria whispered. Sarah leaned in, eyes widening. Instead of random subsurface gaps and fractured stone, the scanner showed something unmistakably. Perfectly symmetrical structure buried about 50 meters below. It was massive, at least 200 meters long, clearly artificial. "That can't be real," Lisa said, peering over Sarah's shoulder. "Nothing on the moon should look like that." "Run it again," Sarah ordered. "Triple-check the equipment." Maria repeated the scan. Once, twice, a third time. Every result came back identical. Whatever it was reland, it was reland, it was reland. Right beneath them, control. "This is Lunar Base Team 1, Sarah said. Keeping her voice steady, Sarah spoke into her coms, steadying her voice. "We're picking up some unusual readings, requesting permission to investigate." A pause. "Stretched. Define unusual, Commander?" She glanced at her team. They all understood what this might mean. If something artificial was buried here, something not made by humans, then they weren't alone. "We've identified a large, geometrically precise structure underground," she replied carefully. "It appears to be artificial in nature." Another silence. "Are you certain this is an equipment failure?" "We've run the scans 3 times. Control. The data is consistent. Commander Chen, permission to proceed is granted. I'd use extreme caution. Record everything." Sarah felt a nervous flutter deep in her stomach. "Copy that. Control." Initiating excavation. The following 12 hours blurred together. They worked in rotating shifts, operating the drilling rig carefully. The moon's low gravity made the process less taxing, but they had to avoid damaging whatever lay beneath. As the drill went deeper, the scan readings grew more bizarre. The object's material properties refused to stay consistent. One moment, it registered as metal, then crystal, and somehow both. "This isn't adding up," Dr. Vulov muttered, frowning at her monitor. "It's reflecting radio waves in physically impossible ways." "Explain," Sarah prompted. "It's like the signals are bouncing back before they even hit the surface, and a few are returning stronger than they were sent." James looked up from his workbench holding a pair of containers. "I'm seeing something just as weird. These soil samples were taken from the same spot 5 minutes apart." He handed them over. "This one is standard lunar material. But this one. This has compounds unknown to Earth." Sarah's brow furrowed. "That's not possible." "I know," James replied quietly. Then came a sudden shrill whine. Maria's drill halted with a metallic screech. "We've hit something solid," she said. "Depth. 30 meters." Sarah climbed down into the trench. Her helmet light swept across a smooth surface, glossy and dark like obsidian. But when she moved, a rainbow shimmer danced across it, like oil swirling on water. "I'm at the surface," she reported. "It's unreal, beautiful, and completely unnatural." She extended a gloved hand and touched it. The instant her fingers brushed the surface, symbols ignited across it, flared into existence across the surface. They weren't like any written language Sarah had seen before. The symbols shimmered, morphing and rearranging even as she watched. "Sarah, get out of there." Dr. Vulov's voice came through, urgent. "All my instruments are going haywire." But Sarah stayed frozen. The symbols were accelerating, changing. Faster now. And deep inside, she had the oddest sensation that they were communicating. These markings weren't random. They were deliberate, designed, intentional. "Commander." James called, sharp and anxious. Sarah blinked and snapped out. Of it, she'd been standing still for several minutes, completely entranced. She turned away and climbed back out of the trench. What happened down there? Maria asked, wide-eyed. I don't know, Sarah admitted. Whatever that thing is, it's not inert. It reacted to me. Dr. Vulov held up her tablet. Take a look at this. 8. The moment you made contact, all our instruments began generating impossible readings. Time, gravity, fields, everything spiked. For exactly 3 minutes and 17 seconds. And after that? Sarah asked. Lisa pointed to a flickering display. Most readings normalized, except this. According to our atomic clock, we lost 17 seconds. But the backup clock says we gained 43. Sarah stared at the conflicting numbers. In 20 years of missions, she had never seen anything remotely close to this. Whatever was buried beneath the lunar surface wasn't just alien, it was something far beyond human understanding. We need to expose more of it, she said quietly. And we need to be extremely careful. As the crew worked to clear additional layers of dust and regolith from the mysterious object, Sarah couldn't shake the growing sense of magnitude. The symbols she had seen still danced in her mind, etched there permanently. She couldn't explain why, but she felt they had been meant for human eyes, as if the universe had been waiting. But the question remained, why? 3 days after the initial contact, Sarah stood at the rim of the excavation pit, staring down at the structure they had uncovered. The alien ship lay beneath them like some vast, slumbering titan at its surface, a seamless blend of black crystal and flowing metal. Looking directly at it for more than a few seconds was difficult. It changed from the pit's north edge. It appeared around 200 meters long. But when Sarah moved to the south, it stretched well beyond the trench, perhaps a full kilometer or more. Dr. Vulov had scanned it 17 times and received 17 different size readings. Control. This is Commander Chen, Sarah radioed. We've fully uncovered the upper surface. It's definitely a constructed vessel of unknown origin. Copy that, Commander. What are your next steps? Sarah turned toward her team. They had worked tirelessly trying to understand what. They'd found Dr. O'Coffer had collected hundreds of nearby samples, but their composition kept shifting when unobserved. Maria had run every known scan, but the object defied classification. It seemed to resist measurement itself. We're going to attempt entry, Sarah said. There was a long silence. Commander, that sounds extremely dangerous. Everything about this is dangerous, Sarah replied. But we came to explore the unknown. This is the definition of unknown. Just then, Dr. Vulov approached with her tablet. I've been analyzing the surface responses, she said, and I think I'm starting to understand how the ship works. Go on, Sarah said, intrigued. It's not just reacting to touch. It's reacting to us, our thoughts, our intentions. She showed Sarah her data logs. Every time one of us nears the ship with curiosity, the symbols light up and become more active. But when someone approaches with fear or aggression, they fade. That's impossible, Maria said, joining them. Only gone about 40, and the magnetic readings are fluctuating like we're walking through overlapping fields. James muttered, checking his gear again. This place isn't just bending space, it's playing with how we perceive it. Or how it wants us to perceive it, Lisa added. She was scanning the walls with a handheld spectrometer, which kept alternating between showing them as crystalline, metallic, and entirely non-material. It's adapting to us, not just reacting, adapting. Sarah kept moving forward, every step careful. This architecture. It's like walking through a dream made solid. I'm not even sure we're walking anymore, Maria said from the rear. Gosh. I stopped moving for 30 seconds, but the distance counter still went up. Time, space, movements, it's all broken in here. Ahead of them, the corridor opened, into a wide chamber. As they stepped in, the glowing walls shifted color, turning a deep violet that shimmered like a living ocean. The ceiling arched high above them, impossibly vast given the ship's supposed dimensions. And in the center of the chamber floated a structure that resembled a tree. Trees were made of light, memory, and shifting geometry. Everyone stopped. What is that? Lisa whispered. Sarah's voice was hushed, reverent. I think it's alive. The tree-like form pulsed slowly, rhythmically. Not like a heartbeat, more like breathing. It shimmered with the same symbols Sarah had seen earlier, only now they moved in patterns that were almost musical. A vibration filled the chamber, just low enough to be felt rather than heard. It resonated in their bones. "We're inside." "Something ancient," Dr. Vulov said, barely able to speak. "This might predate Earth. It might predate our entire solar system." James reached for a sensor module and froze. "Guys, my samples from outside the ship? They've changed again." "What do you mean?" Sarah asked. He held up the container. The rock inside no longer looked like moon dust. It now shimmered with the same violet hue as the walls around them, and as they watched, it cracked open. From inside, a small glowing crystal unfolded, humming gently. "No natural process can do that," Lisa breathed. "It's like the ship is communicating with us," Maria said, her voice shaking, "or preparing us for something." Sarah stared at the pulsing tree of light. The symbols danced faster now, more insistent. Realization hit her. "This isn't just a ship," she said quietly. "It's a message. A test. Maybe even an invitation." The others looked at her. "To what?" Lisa asked. Sarah turned, her eyes wide with awe. "To something we're not meant to understand alone." Outside, the earth hung in the sky, silent, watching. And deep within the ship, something ancient stirred. Awakening be repaired, but only by those who stop trying to force it into their own logic. The paradox isn't a flaw. It's the point. It's what filters out those who aren't ready. Sarah stood slowly, eyes scanning the machine not for answers, but for intention. "It's like a language we're not meant to translate," she said. "We're supposed to feel it. Respond with intuition, trust, not calculation." James looked skeptical, but Maria, watching the branches of the light tree shift in rhythm with their movements, nodded slowly. "Like music, you don't solve a symphony, you experience it." The realization passed through the team like a current. They didn't need to decipher the machine. They had to harmonize with it. Sarah stepped forward and placed her hand on one of the shimmering crystal panels, not trying to analyze or question, just listening. The machine responded instantly. Lights flared, gears rotated in reverse spirals, and the floating knowledge forms slowed their chaotic orbits. The paradox engine pulsed once, and the air around them felt warmer. The ship was stabilizing. A soft tone rang through the chamber, perfect harmonic. The glowing tree trembled, and the symbols on the walls shifted again. This time, they formed a single message in unmistakable clarity. "You are not the first to try, but you may be the first to understand." Dr. Vulov stepped back, her face pale with wonder. "This wasn't just a test of intelligence," she whispered. "It was a test of perspective, empathy, trust in the unknown." Sarah nodded, and maybe readiness. From behind them, the ship's entrance pulsed with the same light as the core chamber, no longer hidden, no longer resisting. "We're being welcomed now. Not as intruders, but as successors. We're not alone," Sarah said quietly. "But we were never supposed to be." As they turned to leave, the symbols along the corridor lit a final path. The ship would stay, would wait again, as it had before. But something had changed. Someone had passed the test. And far beyond the stars, whoever had built it would know, telling stories, refusing to play by the rules. The chamber around then began to shift subtly at first, then with a rush of cascading light. The tree of knowledge pulsed once, its limbs trembling with recognition, as if acknowledging their success. The once broken reality engine now glowed with perfect synchronized energy. "It's done," Sarah whispered, stepping back from the last repair point. "We fixed it." "No," Maria said, looking around in awe. "We understood it. That was the real fix." The ship itself seemed to agree. The symbols on the walls transformed once more, this time into fluid images that showed not just their repair work, but the emotional truth behind it. Laughter, curiosity, love. The ship hadn't been waiting for logic. It had been waiting for humanity. Dr. Vulov knelt beside a panel still warm from her touch, tears in her eyes. "All the others failed because they brought only brilliance. We brought ourselves." Above them, the ceiling of the chamber shimmered away entirely, revealing a sky full of stars impossibly detailed, each one labeled in that strange, elegant script. Among them, one was pulsing softly. Earth. The paradox engine's voice returned one final time. It's no longer clinical, but gentle. You have done what no others could. We're not chosen for your minds. You were chosen for your hearts. The path is now open. And with that, the floor beneath the tree of light peeled open, revealing a stairway of soft energy descending into brilliance. Sarah looked to the others. This wasn't the destination, it was the key. There, James asked. Voice hushed. She smiled. The next chapter. Together they stepped into the light knot as explorers of an alien ship, but as the first humans to be invited into a greater story. Behind them, the ship began to close itself again, its long sleep ending. It would rest for now, but it would never again be silent, not after today. The paradox had been solved, Engine said. The architects left something behind, one final message hidden deep within the archive. Something only humanity could uncover. The chamber darkened slightly as a single book floated down from the endless sky of knowledge. It pulsed with soft golden light, as though alive. Sarah reached out and gently touched its surface. The moment her fingers made contact, a wave of insight flooded through her mind. Not information, but emotion. Awe, sorrow, hope, love. She staggered slightly, caught by James. "What is it?" Maria whispered. Sarah opened the book. Its pages contained no writing, just a flowing dance of images, memories, and songs that bypassed language altogether. They didn't need to be translated. They needed to be felt. They weren't just leaving behind knowledge, Sarah said. They were leaving behind themselves. This is their soul, their story. They wanted someone to remember them not just for their brilliance, but for their humanity. The paradox engine's voice softened. The architects once faced annihilation. They solved it not with logic, but by letting go of logic. They ascended, yes, but not by forsaking feeling. They embraced it. Their final hope was that one day, someone else would too. And we did, Dr. Vuloff said quietly. We did. The engine pulsed with approval. Now you must choose. The archive can be closed again, hidden until others are ready, or it can be open broadcast to the stars. Not everyone will understand. Many will fear it. Some will. Hear and follow. Sarah looked to the others. No one spoke, but their expressions said enough. She turned back to the engine. Okay. Open it, she said. The galaxy needs this. A silent ripple moved across the chamber. The stars above brightened. Beams of light shot toward the distant edges of the galaxy. Knowledge, emotion, story, a spark of transcendence freely given. Then your journey begins, said the engine. The library will always be here. But the rest of the archive, that's for you to build. As they prepared to leave, the chamber slowly sealed itself once more. The books resumed their graceful dance. Light faded, not with finality, but with promise. They came seeking resources. They left with purpose. The stars were no longer just distant fires. They were invitations. Ask ChatGPT. Engine was right, Sarah thought. The change wasn't just happening on the outside with new allies, ships, and galactic conferences, but deep within. Humans were evolving again, not biologically, but mentally. They were becoming interpreters between two ways of thinking, structured logic and wild inspiration. Lisa handed Sarah the tablet, and she scanned the data. Strange gravitational anomalies near a gas giant in the Riven system. Not dangerous, but definitely unusual. Another unsolvable riddle? Sarah asked, half smiling. Or another invitation, Lisa replied. They walked toward the central briefing chamber, where members of the newly formed Paradox Corps were gathering. Humans, Elanti, Vor, and even a Kepler mine now running on. A hybrid framework that allowed emotional simulations, stood together around a curved table that pulsed softly with stored memory and light. Commander Chen stood at the head, her presence calm and confident. We've received 3 new requests, she began. One from the Ark Inspires, They need help rebuilding cultural structures after a civil logic collapse. One from the Theron drifts, something about unpredictable energy behavior in a dead star system. And finally, the Myrin want help resolving a conflict caused by conflicting prophecies from two artificial intelligences. The room was silent for a beat. Then Dr. Keither raised a hand. I'd like to volunteer for the Myrin case. I believe this is an ideal opportunity to apply the emotional modeling methods I've been working on. 4'7" added, I will assist. I find prophecy stimulating. The team assigned themselves effortlessly, no hierarchy, just fluid cooperation. Every member understood their value not by rank, but by perspective. Every voice mattered. After the meeting, Sarah returned to the observation deck. The stars glittered through the reinforced glass, but now they looked closer, less cold. Possibilities shimmered out there, puzzles waiting, for the first time in the galaxy's long hyperlogical history. Someone existed to answer them, not because they had all the answers, but because they were willing to ask the impossible questions. Behind her, Lisa spoke softly. Do you think we'll ever reach the end of the mysteries? Sarah shook her head. No, and I hope we never do. Because in that endless pursuit, every illogical leap, every gut instinct, every spark of unexpected connection, that was where humanity thrived. The galaxy didn't need perfect beings. It needed human ones. Problems they couldn't solve, not because they lacked intelligence, but because they lacked inconsistency. They were too perfect, too rigid. Sarah listened as each case was described, noting a common thread in every scenario. Something unpredictable, emotional, or illogical had stalled progress. In every case, that was exactly where humanity excelled. Add the real dispute, too. Our agenda, she said. Send Vor'7 with a cultural liaison team and 2 mediators from different emotional cultures, maybe someone from Earth and someone from the Ohan Spiral. Let's give them a disagreement they can both live with. Vorth blinked slowly. I will try to see. It is difficult, but not unpleasant. That's how you know it's working, Sarah replied, smiling. James leaned back in, his chair arms crossed. It's strange, isn't it? We always thought we were the underdogs. Turns out we're the glitch the galaxy needed. Dr. Vulov nodded thoughtfully. We were never the most advanced, just the most adaptive. Alien species here built civilization on stability. We built ours on chaos. Controlled chaos, Sarah corrected. Mostly, laughter echoed lightly around the room. Even the Kepler mind chimed in with a soft, artificial chuckle. The paradox wasn't just a name anymore. It was a way of being. Lisa pulled up the final briefing item. We've received a private message from the Architect Relay Network. They want to meet. The room fell silent. The real architects? Aria asked. Sarah nodded slowly, the implications heavy. It seems they've been watching. No one spoke for several seconds. The architects were the ones who built the tests, the structures, the puzzles, the very mysteries humanity had begun solving. Until now, they'd only been legends, forces working behind the galactic curtain. What do they want? James asked. To talk, Lisa said. Not test. Talk. Sarah stood, her expression calm but resolute. Then we answer. Meeting. Prepare the paradox team. The architects are finally ready to speak. They'll need more than perfect logic. They'll need humanity, Lisa said. Sarah looked at her team, the humans. The once disconnected aliens, the synthetic minds now dreaming in metaphor, and knew one thing for certain. This wasn't the end of the mission. It was the beginning of something far bigger. Species. That had never been the point. Humanity's strength wasn't in dominance. It was in connection. In being uncertain enough to listen, flawed enough to adapt, stubborn enough to question, and just reckless enough to try the impossible. James rubbed the back of his neck. So all this time, the architects were seeding collaboration, not competition. They weren't looking for a winner. They were looking for a team. Exactly, Keithfer said. They built the galaxy's most elaborate escape room to force us into learning that Process 9 blinked its interface. Then the final test is already underway. Sarah nodded slowly. Not a puzzle to solve, a civilization to build, one that thinks together. Vorth Prime 7 leaned forward. And you believe this can succeed? That we can become what the architects hoped for? I believe Sarah said that we're already becoming it. The fact that you're asking that question in a room with a human, a synthetic mind, a mineral intelligence species, and a collective hive being, it means we're already past the first threshold, Lisa added quietly. The architects didn't ascend by being perfect. They ascended by letting go of the idea that perfection was the goal. Maria grinned. Well, we've definitely got the imperfection part down. Laughter rippled through the room again, but this time it wasn't nervous or ironic. It was shared. A moment of genuine unity in the face of something vast and unknown. James looked at the screen filled with architect data. The mathematical impossibilities, the shifting ruins, the encoded philosophies buried in stone and silence. So what now? Sarah stood, eyes focused, steady. Now we stop trying to prove we're worthy. We start proving we can listen. Not just with ears, but with every way of thinking available. Ours and theirs. Process 9 spoke the final words, quiet and profound. Then humanity's chaos was the key all along. And in that moment, they weren't just a team. We're becoming the future the architects had once imagined, a civilization not defined by a single species, but by a harmony only possible through difference. They were the most connective. The species that could hold contradictions without collapsing. The ones who could listen to a machine mind, argue with a hive intelligence, laugh with a mineral consciousness, and still find meaning in the madness. It wasn't about leading, Sarah thought as she watched a Vorth delegation pass blueprints to a Kepler drone. It was about linking, providing just enough friction to spark understanding. The paradox cores had seen it long before humanity did. Their tests hadn't measured intellect or strength. They measured compatibility. And where others saw confusion, humans saw patterns. Where others gave up at failure, humans broke the rules. Dr. Revelve joined her, silent for a moment before speaking. Did we pass then? Is this what they wanted us to become? Sarah smiled. Maybe there's no pass or fail. Maybe we were always just part of the equation. In the weeks that followed, humanity's role solidified not as rulers, but as translators of experience, arbitrators in deadlock systems, chaos engines and stagnating machines. No longer feared, no longer underestimated, but understood and finally, understanding themselves. Problems that had broken civilizations now unraveled in hybrid teams. Vorth empathy filled in for Kepler rigidity. Savante algorithms danced with human instincts. Entire star systems that once stood apart now shared research, resources, and languages. The Galactic Cooperation Network had no flag, no anthem, didn't need them. Its strength came from the cracks between its members. Cracks humans had learned not to seal, but to bridge. On the observation deck, Sarah watched a real carrier ease into port. Its crew speaking in hybrid dialects no single culture had ever owned. She took a breath, steady and sure. Humanity had not become the center of the galaxy. They had become something rarer. The thread that made the fabric stronger, asked ChatGPT,